We celebrate today the memorial of Saint Benedict, the father of the monastic tradition of the West. Truly a man who was blessed indeed. And I've always felt a special affinity for Saint Benedict. I'm not exactly sure why, but I've always admired him very much. And when I was making my confirmation, I chose him as my patron for my confirmation. And as I have gone through life and years as a priest, I am still very much admiring his example and what he has to teach the whole church. Most of us will never become monks or nuns. We do, however, live in community. We must, however, every day prioritize God and following God's will ahead of the pleasures of this life, ahead of our desires, some of which are very good desires for security or desires for our independence and so on. But St. Benedict shows us how to set all of those other things aside and choose God consistently, over and over, day in and day out. And that's really what the life of discipleship is about. Becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ isn't just saying on one day, "Okay, Lord, I understand. You are number one. And today I am going to do your will and not my will." Now, that's an important first step. But we all know too well. What about tomorrow? What about tomorrow when I still have to throw my feet out of bed and go back to work? What about next week when the people that God has given me in my life to love are rubbing me the wrong way? What about next month when the dreams and hopes that I had in the past start sort of haunting me and putting in my mind doubts about the path that I'm on? What about a year from now? My relationships have fallen apart. When the bonds that I was counting on have been sundered, and I'm wondering how to move forward. The path of real discipleship is the path that leads us through such events which are really inevitable in life, always forward to the glory of God. And we see in St. Benedict how at a very young age he was able to recognize that what the world had to offer was fleeting, it was vain, it compared nothing to what God could offer. But although he came to this decision very early on in his life, really as a youth, and although he took very bold steps initially, he is a saint because he stayed on that path of holiness through thick and thin over an entire lifetime. He was often lonely, or when seeking solitude, he had crowds thronging to him. Very often as he tried to share with others what he had learned, what insights he had gained in the spiritual life, they rejected him. There is an account even that he had gathered around him a community of monks. In fact, they had really gathered around him. They had asked him to be their abbot. But as he had tried to impose a bit of discipline upon them, they were so resentful that they tried to murder him. This happened not just once, but there was even another case where he had a community gathered around him, and jealousies were erupting, and it just was on the verge of destroying the community entirely. But he said, okay, for the sake of what is best, I have to move on. How many of us, having dedicated years of our life to something, are able to say in all humility, I do not have what God needs brought to this situation, and I am not the one God needs to bring it. It's time for me to move on. Saint Benedict was able to do that. And his blessedness was proven after all of these years, in the sense that he was able to take all of this experience in life that he had had personally. He was able to comb the depths of the spiritual tradition, the writing of the Desert Fathers, and put it into a mode of life, a rule of life, practicable for the people in his place and in his time. And we still have in this world monasteries of both men and monasteries of women following this rule to this very day. If you've never taken the time to read the Rule of Saint Benedict, I encourage you to do so. It's really not long. You could read it in one sitting. Will absolutely everything there apply to your life? No. But a good deal amount of it will. There's a good deal there that is applicable to any household. Saint Benedict understood what Jesus tells us in the gospel today, that no servant will ever be above his master. And he experienced the rejection, the betrayal, the dangers that Jesus experienced. And following his Lord, he also followed Jesus to glory. The account of Saint Benedict's death goes something like this. He was barely still alive, and in his monastery he asked his fellow monks to hold him up before the altar so that he could receive communion one final time. He received the Lord, and then there was a vision of this beautiful pathway opening up, going all the way to heaven, flanked by countless beautiful lamps, strewn with carpets. And Saint Benedict was able just to take a sort of step forward, and he breathed his last. When we really have followed the path of discipleship, that's how the last leg of that journey will be. When we really have remained faithful to the early fervor of our commitments, through the thick and thin, through the ups and downs, through the trials, the betrayals, the abandonments, the confusions, the doubts, the last leg of that journey is so beautiful. It is so blessed. So may we have the courage, inspired by Saint Benedict's example, to follow our Lord and Master, just as he did, and ourselves know that same path to glory.